Welcome everyone. This is I believe our third SBIR cohort meeting. Is that right? Today's topic is Scope the Project for USDA. I'm Meredith. I'm the webinar moderator. So if you encounter any issues, I'll sort of be just here in the background to help out. This is an interactive meeting, so you can turn on your camera if you wish. If you have any questions, you can turn on your mic and ask, or you can always put them in the chat. There will be some time for open discussion as well. And Karen, our innovation specialist, is your host today. And Karen, I'm going to let you introduce our guest, so I'll hand it over to you.
Great. And again, just thank you everybody for stepping in for a little bit today. As Meredith said, this is week 3. And after today, these meetings will be every week during the month of August. So we have 5 more of these sessions scheduled at the same time on Thursdays. And then we're really trying to wrap everything up, at least class-wise, before the Labor Day holiday. So trying to close all this out by the end of August, and then you'll have 2 weeks to really continue working one-on-one or working on your, finalizing your proposals and testing, adding things to the portal, getting all your questions answered in terms of submission before the 17th, September 17th submission deadline for your SBIRs. So I did want to, you remember Dan Sir is my partner in this journey. And I think most of you have met him or have been working with him. And of course, Catherine Corley, my counterpart at the University of Arkansas, ASBTDC. And we have another ride along today. We want to welcome Dr. Dennis Goodis, who is Assistant Deputy. I don't know if I have your title right, but for the group that we've been talking about that is responsible for all of the USDA labs to support this kind of work. And we asked Dennis to come because we've been discussing the potential for partnering with ARS labs and also CRADA agreement. So we've asked him to come present that today. It's a really great timing in terms of where you are in terms of, developing your partners and continuing on your work plans and firming up those budgets. And so today we are going to be talking about work plans and budgets. So this is, like I say, really good timing. If you need another week or 2 to hone in on the specifics of the work plan based on who your partners are, this is our opportunity to learn more about USDA and how we might work quickly to include some of them in our partners. So, all right. Without further ado, I think, Dennis, we'll just have you share your slides first then, and then Dan and I will take over and we'd like to keep this open and interactive. So I believe Dennis has said that, if you come off mute, if you have questions as we go, okay? Or you can drop them in the chat if they occur to you that way. And Meredith will be helping monitor all your questions. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I'm on, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay, sharing your slide.
This is the slide. Okay. Okay, just to be sure here, you're at 11:30, which is, so it's good morning for you. I'm in the afternoon still. Easiest way to say this, I'm the deputy for the Office of Technology Transfer is what it comes down to. Nobody puts on a conference. I don't care how it is, better than they do in Arkansas with Karen and Meredith. They just do such a superb job. Dan, it just goes without saying. As you look at the slide, the takeaway message that I want you to have is write down my email address. That's the key thing. That's the only key thing. After you write down my email address, go ahead and put your pen down because I don't want you taking any notes at all. When this is finished, what I will do is anybody who sends me either I can provide the copy of the slides to Karen and Meredith, or anybody who wants to can write to me and ask for the slides and I'll provide them there. but the intent here is for the open dialogue. I don't want you to be so concerned with taking notes that you miss key elements of the discussion. This is one of the more enjoyable aspects of my position, because there's nothing I enjoy more than research. And there's not a more enjoyable component of research than technology transfer. So I'm very excited to be here. And quite frankly, I have an ulterior motive. That's just who I am. That is the sincere hope that as a result of our discussions today, that we can at some point in time, hopefully as soon as possible, look into the possibility of establishing what I hope will be a long-term and continuing collaborative relationship between the ARS and your businesses. So that's all the good stuff. I will not be monitoring the chat at all. I'll be focused on what I'm saying because I get so wrapped up in what I'm saying. So if it's not going to offend me at all if you just interrupt and say, but wait, stop, I have got a question, because that's how I work best when we interact, and I want that to be as much as possible. So as we go forward, especially with new businesses, what I find is that startup businesses especially don't have a grand idea of what it is that technology transfer is. A lot of people have heard the term, but what that actually means gets somewhat confusing and lost in translation. So the best way to put that is technology transfer is the transfer of research results, products, devices, inventions from the laboratory to the public sector for practical application. So that's about as succinctly and as basic as I can make that. What we do is, if you have I don't care how good your research is, if it doesn't get out to the user, if it's not out there, people are not aware of it, then we've lost. So along with doing quality research, we need to make sure that there's a mechanism out there so that we are as effective as possible in transmitting the results of that out there, so there's going to be a public benefit. Now, how we do that will vary. Most of the time, and people don't realize that, but most of the time, we can most effectively do that through publications in peer-reviewed journals, field days, workshops, presentation at seminars, symposiums, that type of thing. But on occasion, depending on what the research is, we would do that by the use of patents. And if we're going to do a patent, the intent there is that we're going to have a license that will be a consequence of that patent. Now, that's important. That's especially important for you, because a license will result in a stream of revenue returning back to the scientist, and you are in business to make money. So that's important for you. And we're going to talk about that process as we go forward. Interestingly, the USDA is not interested in making money. We make money because of our patents, but whether we make $150 million or $5, it doesn't make any. It's of small consequence to us. Whatever money we get, we just turn back over. So it's not like our program grows or anything. We just facilitate the research. So in many ways, that makes us unique to virtually anybody. And that's one of the reasons that we can be so successful and generous in the terms of our agreements. So let me just talk, if I could, about the Office of Technology Transfer. One of the things that makes us so effective is that we have three sections. We have the partnership section. That's what deals with the actual development of the agreement and the negotiation of the agreement. And then we have an in-house patent staff that supports the the transition of the technologies. And then we have a completely unique staff or different staff, which works with the negotiation of the licenses. And every time that we are developing what we call a CRADA, and we're going to talk a lot about CRADAs, that statement of work and the terms of that CRADA are reviewed by both the patenting section. They're developed by the partnership section, but they're reviewed by the patent section and the licensing section to make sure that what we have is the content is appropriate and enforceable as we move forward. I have to tell you, I always do this because I'm really proud of the organization that I'm working with. We have a tremendous team over here. Every one of our patent attorneys has, besides a degree in law, also has a PhD in either engineering, such as mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, or in science, chemistry, biology, botany, whatever. So there's not an area of agriculture that you can come to that we don't have an attorney with a background in some aspect of what you're talking about. And then our licensing staff, accumulated some of their experiences well over 50 years. So they've been doing this for a while. The partnership section, the people who will be working with you are either attorneys or they are PhD scientists. I'm the deputy. I have 5 degrees. I've got 2 degrees in healthcare. I've got a graduate degree in business, a graduate degree in informatics, and my doctorate's in research. My last assignment was heading up the program for technology transfer program for the Defense Health Agency. I left that to be the deputy here because this is such a great organization. When you come over here, we will walk you through the process. So if it's a new time that you're coming to us or you're returning from a past experience, you're going to find that there's people who are going to hold your hand and guide you through that process. So it's not going to be as difficult as it may sound. In terms of agreements, if you look on our website, you're going to see about 10 to 12, I'm not sure what it is, I should know, I put them out there, different types of templates. Those templates, I developed a template for every imaginable type of research scenario. Actually, that's not at all close to reality. The repository of templates I have is 62, and I'm in the process of developing 3 more. I don't expect scientists to understand the nuances of all the different types of agreements. That's our responsibility. What we're going to talk about in terms of SBIR are going to be 2 types of agreements. We're going to talk about one type of agreement, which is going to help you stay in business. And we're going to talk about a second type of agreement, which is going to allow you to be more successful in an SBIR submission process. Now, if anyone wants to get together with me and talk about all these other categories and types of agreements, send me an email. I'll be more than glad to sit down. We can talk that over, but that's not germane to our discussion today. Oops. Okay, now the first type of agreement I'm talking about is a non-disclosure agreement. This is not going to help you with your submission of the SBIR, but this is really important. If you're looking to establish a collaborative relationship, the only way that can happen is if you sit down with a scientist from another organization, to include ARS, and you're going to share what your thoughts are, what your research ideas are, what research you've done, your approach, milestones, objectives, the type of funding which is going to be necessary. You discuss the whole concept. However, every person who enters into these discussions doesn't end up walking away with a collaborative relationship. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times with talking to different partners before you find this is the partner I really wanted to get together with and work with. But in the meantime, you've shared a lot of information with them. If it turns out you could know somebody for 10 years and they do research with you on numerous occasions, but on this particular occasion, You listen, they listen, and they say, I like your idea, but I just don't like your approach. I just think it's wrong. You can't come to an agreement. They walk away, you walk away. But in the meantime, you've given them a great deal of information. They can use that information, modify it slightly, and actually end up publishing that research. And they've done nothing ethically wrong. That's why it's very important when you're going to have a conversation with a cooperator that you establish a non-disclosure agreement, which is giving you confidentiality provisions so that information that's shared cannot be used. And that that's a legal document. If somebody violates that with one of my scientists, we turn that matter over to the Department of Justice, and that person has to face the consequences of violating a contract. So I would urge anybody, including ARS, if you're going to have an agreement and you're going to start talking about a potential collaboration, make sure that you sit down and develop a non-disclosure agreement. But that's just to make sure that you don't get yourself in too much trouble. If it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it's too often. And so you want to make sure that you don't lose your research to somebody else. The research agreement that I really want to talk about is what we call the CRADA, the Cooperative Research and Development Agreement. Now, if you look at NASA, Department of Defense, Department of Energy, NIH, or USDA, every organization has very unique research agreement types that they have. The CRADA is the only type of agreement that every federal organization have. It's an agreement that exists between a federal research agency and an outside federal organization or company. And what we have here is that's shared research where they work back and forth. But this is very important because it provides the greatest amount of confidentiality provisions, and it protects any material that is transferred during the course of the research. It's protected research, it's protected material, and it can't be released to anyone else. The research results can't be shared with anybody else. They're protected as well. This research is used whenever there's going to be intellectual property, which will result where a patent is expected. And this is important because if a patent is expected, then we expect there's going to be a license, and that's a funding stream. So it's important that we protect this as much as possible. So I have got to get there right. So it also provides, if we do research and you come up with something phenomenal, such as a solution to citrus greening, which is worth billions of dollars, and you think, oh, I don't want anybody else to have this, because you are on the CRADA, you have the first option to have an exclusive license, so nobody else can work with this research, and you can be taking your time, and you can fully develop this research and really benefit financially from having this license. Also, remember that we have the patent and licensing staff on board. You can go through us, and we will coordinate with the U.S. Patent Office, and we will negotiate the licensing in-house. So we don't have to, for a small business or a startup, that's a major concern, because you probably don't have a lot of experience in dealing with the U.S. Patent Office. So we handle those types of functions for you. When you're talking about startups also, one of the issues that is going to be a concern is you don't have a great deal of funds usually that are at your discretion if you're a small business or a startup. And if we develop a partnership agreement, you could say, for instance, I'm prepared to commit $40,000 to this project. or $80,000 because you expect to get the SBIR funds. And so we sign that agreement. And then what happens if the SBIR, for some unknown reason, doesn't get funded? Now you're committed to an agreement, and you may not, that might put too great a financial strain on your organization. So what we do is we will go through the same process. We will sign the agreement with the same terms on it, but I will add a provision in that CRADA, which states that the funding is contingent upon receipt of the SBIR funds. So if your SBIR funds do not come through, you're not bound to that agreement, and you're not then put in a situation where we're straining the resources of your organization. We can keep it in process, keep it in effect if you prefer, or if you want to have it go and in a pending status until you can resubmit for the SBIR funds. That's your option. But we're trying to work with you, and we're trying to find a way that you can move forward without limiting your options. The second area that we provide support is the CRADA sometimes takes a while to negotiate because it is ultimately a legal document, and we have to move forth, and we have versions go back and forth. We're approaching the SBIR deadline of September 17th. That is coming on us like a train. If we don't have the agreement fully negotiated and executed, you don't get credit for having a CRADA there. On the other hand, we don't want to rush and put down an agreement that is not fully developed. Well, let me put it this way. I am the signatory authority for all research agreements for the USDA, for the Agriculture Research Service. I will not sign an agreement unless it is tight and complete. So what we have as an option is I will, if we're still in negotiations back and forth, but it's just a question of time before we can iron out those issues, I will develop a letter and provide that to you, saying that we're in the final stages of developing the CRADA. As soon as the CRADA is completed, we will provide a copy of that CRADA to you, and then you put that in with your SBIR submission, and that's like a placeholder. Now, it's not going to hold for I mean, we're going to have probably a couple of weeks after that. We're going to have that CRADA completed and be able to submit that with your application. But it's going to buy us a few weeks so that we can continue the negotiations. And if we have a situation like that where we're down to the deadline, I will get personally involved, and I'll make sure that we expedite this process as soon as possible so we get you taken care of. But through a CRADA, we have those options available to us. And again, this is the other slide on the CRADA that I already.
Hey, Dennis, I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. Dan had his hand up for a question.
Yeah,
Yep.
Dennis, so when we talk about that letter, so if you did a letter, so I've done some of these letters with clients in the past, and a lot of times, more with university researchers and stuff. Do we actually have to have an agreement in place before the project is reviewed by the proposal is reviewed by reviewers, or can we wait until we get the hint that they're going to actually fund it and then put the effort into finalizing the CRADA? Which way does that work usually?
Well, actually, we need to have the CRADA signed and executed as quickly as possible. If it goes through a review process and it's beyond those weeks, they're probably going to look at that. I don't want to speak for SBIR, but what they have told me is their expectation is they'll have that completed document within the next few weeks. But as long as we put in there that statement for contingency, which says if the funding doesn't come through, the statement, the CRADA will not be executed, then we're going to be protected. So what we do is we write the letter, we add that provisional statement in there, so we are covered if the funding doesn't come through. It's not creating a hardship on the organization, but we have a fully executed agreement that can be in the hands of the SBIR office. So we're covered either way, and in both situations, we're not putting an undue burden on the company.
And one other question is, in the CRADA, will you, within the CRADA, any intellectual property that the company has is bringing to the table beforehand is sort of disclosed in the CRADA? And it's more of a question of what's jointly invented is what becomes the licensable piece. Is that generally how that works?
No, that's how it works all the time.
Okay.
We are looking at, we identify in the at the onset of the agreement, when the agreement is put together, that the patents that belong to ARS and the patents that belong to the company as to who has what. But again, your comment is dead on target over here. What is going to be patentable is going to be what is jointly developed through, or let me put that in a different way, what is developed through the CRADA. Now, it could be that the actual invention is actually done through the company and ARS is not involved in that at all, in which case the patent is going to, the ownership, and ownership is determined by the patent attorney. So I'm not going to say what ownership is, but the way the document is drafted is that if it's what is owned or what is developed solely by the company is owned by the company. What's solely owned by ARS is owned by ARS, and what's jointly developed is jointly owned. But again, what patents the company brought as they entered into the agreement, that is off the table, that is theirs, and that is not subject to any negotiation. We have no play in that.
And it doesn't actually, the company doesn't actually have to have a patent, as long as they're disclosed their idea, what information they're bringing, that disclosure within the CRADA is what protects that.
Well, we don't, we have experience that very often, and I've recently had this, somebody came up with 3 pages of I've got ideas on this, ideas on this, ideas, and I'm not going to, that's not going to play. So what I look at is what I can put a number to. If you've got a provisional patent or if you've got a patent, some way to distinguish conclusively what is only yours, then I will say, okay, then that's what you're bringing to the table. But different ideas you're coming to the table with, it could be that you're coming to the table with ideas on a whole number of things that have not been fleshed out, and you really don't have much you're bringing to the table. So it's going to be patentable or definable. If you can define it with like such as even a provisional patent number, then or a patent application number, then that would count.
Thanks.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I want to bring to the table also is the selection of the partner. This is really important. When I was doing bench science, what I found is that, or the way I would work this is I work my research to its natural conclusion. When my resources were drying up, then I'd say, okay, now here's where I am, and this is my endpoint, desired endpoint. What's the delta? Where am I? Why am I not at that desired endpoint? And I would say, am I missing expertise, technology, equipment? What is it that I'm missing? Once I identified what that is, then I would go to my technology transfer coordinator, and jointly we would identify potential partners that had those types of resources that can contribute to the research. So whether you're talking about dealing with ARS or a different potential collaborator, I think the important issue is that you select the right, don't be in a rush to grab a partner, make sure you get the right partner. If you get the wrong partner, they're not going to be comfortable. They're not going to be ready to move forward aggressively, and it's going to slow your research, potentially slow your research down to an absolute crawl. So just be very careful of when you select the appropriate partner, and that deals with whether or not you're dealing with ARS or not. All right, keep going the wrong way. Sorry. Now, we have we have a great relationship with the SBIR people. I present at their conferences. I talk about their work, and I engage in conversations with and there's not a better SBIR organization out there than NIFA. And I've dealt with many that were not NIFA, and so I'm really excited about dealing with them. But if you look at, do it again. If you look at our mission, the ARS mission is to deliver research solutions. And for that, we need resources. I don't have all the resources I need. There's limitations to what I have. You know who's got the resources? That NIFA SBIR group. They've got tons of resources out there. Now, if you look at the NIFA SBIR office, they're saying, look, I've got these resources. I need them to commit to solve problems. I don't have a research portfolio. So we have this symbiotic relationship. When I'm successful, they're successful. When they're successful, I'm successful. And the key to that is the small businesses and the startup businesses, because through them, we all become successful. And so it's one of those relationships where if things fall into the natural order, we can mutually support each other and provide assistance to, and we can all grow. So that's the direction that I like to look at. This is a map of the United States, and it's broken down into different colors. That's only because ARS has different regional areas. So just don't concern yourself with that. But those little dots all over the place are ARS research laboratories. We are virtually, I have to say virtually, in every state, because I think Vermont is the last time I looked, Vermont and New Hampshire were the only two that did not have a research laboratory in them. But we've got 90 research centers, and then we've got the overseas labs as well. We've got 2,000 scientists, 6,000 support personnel, and that's my patent attorneys, administrators, accountants, animal handlers. I mean, a wide spectrum. But we are all working together to develop whatever is necessary so that we can support that research program. So what are the research programs? Now we're going to get into the meat of it a little bit. ARS has national programs. SBIR has national programs. They are different. Please keep that in mind at all times. My national program office is completely different from when you're talking with SBIR. They're going to talk about their national programs office, and those are two distinct offices. Please keep that in mind. But we have 4 basic categories: animal production, natural resources, crop production, and human nutrition. And then we have a multitude of different research programs under that. And I would challenge you to find any area of research of agriculture that's not covered within those programs. It just doesn't exist. So that's what we have. That's what we bring to the table. So I've given you a website, but we're not going to touch that right now. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, now this is going to be the fun stuff. This is how you can help find who your partner is going to be or should be. Really, there we go. Thought it wasn't going to work. So hit on one of those. It's a hot link. Hit on that research, and then you can type in ticks. Oops. And it will show you there's 55 projects that we have active right now involving tick research. And you can type or click on any one of them. They'll show you who's involved, the scientist involved with it, what the objective is. It gives you some background on what kind of research they're involved in and read about that type of research. So if you're trying to find tick research, you can read the titles, get an idea, and then help you narrow down where it is or who it is that you should be reaching out to. And
So Dennis, you were saying that that search that you just did was from the first link on the slide?
that's the first link. We're going to do it again because it couldn't. This time we'll do it for. Let's see. We'll do it for honeybees.
I'm still showing the original slide. Is everybody else still seeing this slide? Okay.
Do you not see the slide?
Don't see the search, don't see the live website that you have up. It could be because,
Might have to stop sharing and then share a different window.
yeah,
possibly.
you might have to share a different window, but I hate to disrupt your slideshow.
All right.
Besides, who cares about ticks? Like,
But we care about honeybees, don't we? We
do.
care about honeybees. So Dennis, we are getting copies of the slides, correct?
Yes. Yes.
We can share all these links later. Don't panic. You'll
Yes.
have access to all this. Okay.
Sure. And if for honeybees, there's 58 different projects out there involving honeybees, and we can do the same thing. So let's back up from that again. This time we're going to go to the second national programs. And this is a little bit different. Now, for some reason, the slides are going off on an angle. But these are that 4 categories of research going across with the different research programs under each one. And we can take a look at aquaculture, for instance. And here we learn a little bit about what the program components are, what the mission of it is. We find out what states the research is being conducted in, which gives us a better idea of the program. We can do the same thing for let's do it for crop production. That's good. And this is where the states are, but we can also look, and we can do this for everyone as well. Let's see, where is it? I'm missing it. Program inputs, program planning. Well, it can, this program projects in this area. And click on that. And then you can take a look and, for instance, look at the location. And we'll do, say, Fort Pierce. And hit filter. And then you can find Fort Pierce, Florida. And you can find, come on. These are the 2 labs in Fort Pierce, Florida, where the research is being conducted. The last link is geographic areas. And I'm not going to take, I promise not to take so much of your time, but let's just do rice. And we'll click on that. And you're going to find most of the research is done at the Dale Bumpers National Research Center. And so you can click on that center, and that will give you location, phone numbers of the area director, the research leader, the scientist, who's involved in every aspect of the research within that laboratory. And so if you're not sure, for instance, you want to do something related to rice, probably the best thing would be just to contact the research leader and talk to that individual directly and say what you're interested in, which of your scientists would be most appropriate for me to meet with. There is an option different from any of that, and that is send me an email, say you're having problems, and I'll work through that list with you, make the calls with you, and we'll just do it jointly. So you can either do it independently, or you can do it by contacting me. Never try and call me up, please, because it's just not going to work. But if you send me, if you've got a need to talk to me, and I'm only doing this now, I know I feel like a car salesman when I say this, but this is the truth. I don't normally work in that thing where people just send me. I've got people that handle that, and then they come in to see me when there's a problem. But if you're working with this cohort and you have a problem, you need some support, send me an email, and in the subject line, put down SBIR Arkansas cohort. I will move that to a priority, and I will take care of that right away. If you're sending me an email and it's time sensitive, please indicate in the email that it's time sensitive, and I'll consider it a high priority, and I'll try and get back to you within 24 hours. I can't guarantee that, but I'll try and do that. But the bottom line is this. This is a paradigm shift, and I know that, and you know that. But if you want, because you're working probably for the first time with a cooperator, certainly, or it may be your first time working with ARS, or your first time working with the SBIRs. So this is difficult, and it's a heavy lift. But if you want what you don't have, you've got to do what you've never done. And I really believe that. This is what you've not done before, but you're not alone in this. There's people who will work with you. If you're working with ARS, we will work with you through the process. I know the SBIR people work and work with you through the process. But my mantra to my staff, and they're all across the country, is find a path forward or make one. We are constrained at the government level by federal statute of what we can and cannot do. Certain things we're just not legally able to do, such as governing law that's written into the agreement, or provisions for confidentiality. But other provisions, I have some latitude. And when the agreement gets stuck, they'll come to me and I'll work through that. I'll find a way to make this work. That's what we do. What I tell my people every day is, I don't care if it's Thursday or February, today is the day to be bold and aggressive, and we will do that. We will get you solutions, and we'll work with you to make that happen. That's the last thing is questions. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. I have stopped sharing, right?
Yep, please feel free to come off mute. Ask your question. If you don't ask, you don't get. So Dennis, I guess the one thing I was kind of confused about, it sounds like the CRADA agreement needs to be in process and there's a letter. Is that right? It's two pieces.
No, a letter, if the
No, it's not, the letter doesn't stand in place of the agreement. The
letter, if the agreement is not done, a letter can be drafted by me and provided to the scientist, to the company.
Okay.
And that letter can go in with the submission. Then when CRADA is finished, then that would be added to the application. But you don't need a letter if you've got a fully executed CRADA.
Sure. And how long does it usually take to execute a CRADA? That's kind of the wild card, right?
Well, yeah, and we can't say that, actually. That's a very good question. We can't really say that because It depends on how much negotiation and where the negotiations are. What are people uncomfortable with? What are they looking to have changed? And I don't know. But
Well, and I can't imagine that our cohort, I mean, there are hundreds of submissions being made, there are probably, there are probably many, many CRADAs being developed as we speak.
Oh,
So,
sure. But the message I put out to my the TTCs out there and across the country, I can affect what I can control. And so what I've told them is, if you've got an SBIR, this is time sensitive. This needs to go to the head of the class. It needs to be considered a priority. I asked to be involved informed as soon as there's a SBIR CRADA that is being worked on, so that I can track it at my level. So
yes.
as it's coming up, or if it's stuck. And if there's a problem and somebody doesn't feel as though they're getting if they feel like they're getting the runaround, or there's needless delays, send me an email. I'll
Okay.
call you up and we can talk
You're,
about it.
you're on. Hey, another thing, can you talk about the advantage of the CRADA, especially related to SBIR?
Well, yes, because we have done we track it and at our level, and the big problem with the SBIR program is that people they put in applications and they can get phase 1, and then they put in applications and they can get phase 2. But going and a lot of times in technology transfer, we call it the valley of death, transitioning from phase 2 to phase 3, where we expect that transition to continue. When there's not government funding being provided, it just seems to fall. It falters, and too many technologies are lost. So one of the things I believe that the SBIR demonstrates is that you've got a collaborative partner out there who is saying, I'm ready to commit resources. I'm going to take this beyond that valley of death and take that into that stage 3. And as I'm sure in your presentations, you're talking about the fact that now there's that, I can't think what the program is called, where there's phase 1 money. I think it's, I can't recall what it is in phase 1, something like $50,000 in phase 2, which can be used toward marketability, to increase the marketability.
The TABA.
Yes, that's a great program. I think that's one of the best programs that SBIR has come out with. I think so you've got some funds separate from that, where you can start that process of looking, finding out what you can do to start that process, so that when you reach that phase, the end of phase 2, you've got a mechanism in place to take you into that commercialization phase.
So the other question I actually meant, and I didn't phrase it very well, was we have heard that there is an advantage to having a CRADA agreement in place as you're submitting the SBIR, in terms of it adding to your competitive advantage. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can tell you, I'm always reticent to mention this, but that's okay. I will tell you that we have tracked at ARS our success rate of when people submit and get funded. If one of my scientists says, okay, I want to submit for an SBIR project, their opportunities for funding, I think we're at about getting funding, we're about 15-16%. It was tough. They weren't getting it. We tracked CRADAs. With CRADAs in effect, what was the success rate? And I will tell you, as a scientist, 15-16% is bleak. When a CRADA was in effect, we said, okay, what was their chance of getting for funded? And over a 12-month period, or excuse me, a 24-month period, the difference was something like 75%, 76%. So it was a huge. Now I don't want to give that as a blanket statement because that was just for my organization. But I will tell you, that shows that you've got somebody committed to going and past phase 2 into phase 3. And I will tell you, your project, if you're going to work with a cradle with us, we really are rigorous and working with details on what's included in there, what's in the statement of work, how is it going to be doing, who's going to be doing what, do you have adequate resources for that, what is your budget, and we, define your budget. Why are you spending that? How are you spending that? So I think having that in place and working with our technology transfer coordinators, that prepares you to have a very solid document going forward, which shows that you've got a greater potential for having this actually transition into practical application without government funding. So, I mean, for us, the impact has been absolutely spellbinding. And we're going to start another one of those tracking sessions probably in the next fiscal year. We do that every few years. But a couple of years ago, we ran it. It went for 2 years, and those were our numbers. And we were shocked at that. But I mean, the difference of day and night. So that's why this year I've got research labs in every one of the areas who have contacted me and asked for SBIR presentations to be given so that they can find out what can be done so they could potentially secure SBIR funds. And what I'm telling people also is, even if you didn't look for SBIR funds initially, as the project goes on, you could say, well, you know what, I could really benefit. It doesn't have to be only when the project is starting. You could have a project already in progress and then decide, yeah, I think I would benefit from SBIR funding, and then put in an application, because then you've got an even stronger research project developed. And that again would probably contribute to the selection of your research project. That's just speculation on my part, but I mean, it's a stronger program. It's more refined, more developed, and it's shown progress. So I would think that would be a contributing factor to the selection process.
Makes sense. Totally makes sense. So does anybody else have any questions? I don't know, we do have a few people that are investigating ARS labs through the course of this journey. Does anybody want to?
Yes, this is Ken Olvery, and I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Just to make sure that I'm understanding the sort of overview of the entire process, let me kind of give you what I think you have told us, and if I'm missing something, if you could kind of say, hey, you're missing that, or no, that's basically the right idea. So I'm actually the one that is doing work with honeybees. So if I went to your slide there and I did the search, and I saw a researcher that was doing research in a similar area, and I went ahead and did look at it, and my project is involving varroa mites. So I did see some projects with varroa mites. And if I were to look for researchers that were working in that area and identify them, my next step would be to contact them directly and tell them, hey, I'm interested in talking to you. Would you be okay with signing a non-disclosure agreement? I'm not sure whether that non-disclosure agreement would come from me and my attorney, or whether there's a stock NDA that ARS or these researchers would have available to them for us to use. But after getting to that agreement, then I would discuss the project with them, see where they might be able to contribute. Then we would begin negotiation in terms of how much work they would do, the scope of work, what it would include for my budget for either a phase 1 or a phase 2 SBR, whether we would have a formal CRADA agreement or maybe some other type of agreement. And as those things come together, my understanding was that the CRADA agreement is developed. And again, I'm not sure whether the hand holding that helps to develop that contractual agreement comes from your office or from their office, or how much is involved on my part. But eventually we get to a CRADA agreement, and then we have the letter and the contingency clause that goes into the letter that is a part of the application. And we can submit our SBIR phase 1 or phase 2 with those things then in place. Do I have the basics right? Is there something I'm missing there? Help me make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, let me further refine part of that. As to what your role would be, here's the way it works. Initially, what I would do if I were you, I would write to the RL, the research leader, and have that research leader, or at least include the RL in the correspondence that you send to the scientists. But you should include the research leader, because all the scientists there would be working for that research leader. And the research leader might look at this and say, well, yeah, but that guy's plate is pretty full. And it's and so I'm going to pass this along. So it'll go to a different scientist. So the role of the research leader is critical on this thing. So when you send that or reach out to that scientist, make sure that you're including the research leader. And you should, from the websites that you have, or that I'll provide to you, that I'll provide to Karen, you'll be able to identify who that research leader is. Now, in terms of the non-disclosure agreement, once it's identified that that there is a mutual interest in developing that, then the just identify to the research leader, yes, I want to proceed with a discussion concerning a potential collaboration, and what should happen is that a non-disclosure agreement is drafted up. Now, we will draft up the non-disclosure agreement. I've got people that will draft that up, and it will just take a day. It won't even take a day. It's not that fast. What we want to do is the scope of that non-disclosure agreement needs to be very narrow, because we want to absolutely control, because you don't want to be talking a very generalized conversation with multiple organizations. That's going to defeat the purpose. So having a very narrowly scoped statement of where the discussion is going to be. We've got stock agreements. I can have one of my technology transfer coordinators develop that up, send that off for signature. Once that's signed, then it's just a question of sitting down. Now, in the actual agreement itself, what will happen is, first the RL and the scientist and my technology transfer coordinator will sit down, and they will develop among themselves a consensus, a position of, yes, this is what we want to do. This is how it makes sense for us. And then you get brought into it. And then when all four individuals, and then national program leader will be also involved in this. And so all five of you will then sit down jointly and work on the development of that statement of work. As that is being developed, my technology transfer coordinator, once they see the direction this is going, will start working on the appropriate legalese that goes into the agreement. And the legalese is, will address confidentiality statements, background patents, that type of thing, publications, all the things that are not going to be included in the statement of work. And then as the statement of work gets finalized, my technology transfer coordinator will make sure that they are mutually supportive, send it to me. I will make sure it's reviewed by a patent attorney and the licensing staff to make sure what we've got is appropriate. And then it will go out for review by all parties. Then when it comes back after it's agreed upon, yes, I can live with this, this makes sense to me. Then they'll actually draw up the official document and send it around for signatures. What usually happens is someone will come back and say, well, this sounds good, but I just don't feel comfortable with this aspect, or why does the report writing have to happen this often, or some aspect of that. And usually that's something that can be worked out. When it comes to me, let me just point out, when you're working on a CRADA, it's only collaborative research if both sides are actively conducting research. We do not do quality control for somebody else's products. So if you've developed a harvesting device for apples, don't look and say, okay, I want to have a CRADA to find out how effective this is, because that's only supporting your technology. It's not supporting the field of science. So it's got to be something where both parties are actually doing collaborative research and they're sharing the results as they move forward. Once that's been identified, and then I will look at the statement of work, the legal terms as well. I scrutinize the budget with great detail. And then when I'm comfortable with it, the national program leader has told me that if I'm satisfied with it, he'll be satisfied with it. So, once you get it past me, I'm the obstacle. I'm the toad in the road out there. Once I sign it, it's good. And then after I sign it, then it'll be sent to you. I don't want to see anything. I sign first because I want to make sure that what I've seen it before where it's been sent to you, for instance, you've signed it, and then I find a flaw in the document. So if it gets past me, then I'm comfortable with it. I don't mind re-signing it twice. That's fine. But I think that's inappropriate to be asking you to re-sign multiple times because somebody can't get the document right. So then it's signed. Only after it's signed by both parties is it fully executed, and then it's just entered into our database system, and we're good to go. Now that can be, I've seen it take a few weeks, and then I've seen it take a couple months. So it just depends on how agreeable the terms are to all parties.
I wonder if I could just follow up just with a little bit. You talked about collaborative research. For my project, there is a development component and a research component, and I'm wondering if a CRADA is appropriate for investigating and sort of developing the prototype and the research that goes around what the prototype needs, and then also how the prototype would operate, or if there are initial stages in the prototype where things don't work out like you were expecting, that the research on the USDA side could come in and help with additional development. I'm wondering if you can define a little bit for me your interpretation of the appropriateness or the differences between the research and development components.
Well, actually, if we're conducting research, that's very cut and dried. We understand that part. But in terms of the development, are we taking a look at that and help creating the solutions to the development of that device? If we are doing that, then we're actively engaged in what would be a collaborative effort. So I have no problem with that. I can sign that. The problem is if one side is doing the work and the other side is saying, okay, fine, and my contribution is I'll help write the publication. No, that's not, or they'll come back and say, I'll review and do an analysis of the results. That's not right, because those kind of cases, when they get challenged, they go to court, and I have to defend in court why I signed that agreement. I won't sign those agreements. That's the kind of thing I won't sign. But what you're talking about, that sounds to me, the way it's being presented to my, as though there is going to be some active effort on both sides to find
Mhm.
solutions to the problem, whether it be research oriented or the development of maybe mechanical solutions. So I have no problem. That would work.
That's helpful. Thank you.
That sounds like something that would easily be patentable as well. I will
Right.
tell you that if you have research collaboration and it goes through and it develops a product and it's not through a CRADA, then that product would have to go through a patent board to make a decision on whether or not it would be submitted for a patent. When it goes through a CRADA, it does not go through any other reviews. It immediately goes to the development of a patent. So it's a streamlined process to get through and get patents approved.
Yeah, I think our project is far enough along that it's almost patentable. However, I feel certain that there will be potential for improvements or changes as the prototype is developed. Right now, everything is based off of theoretical models, and of course, with theoretical models, you make lots of assumptions, and the actual building of the prototype may or may not turn out like we're expecting, and then we may need additional help to say, okay, where are our models mismatching reality, and how do we work around to the right solution?
That's why they call it research. I mean, that's exactly what it is. So, but just, I heard something that did concern me a little bit. You said whether we're going to go to phase 1 or phase 2. You have to go to phase 1 first.
Mhm.
You cannot go immediately to phase 2. And you can only, and I'm probably stealing Karen's thunder here, but only people who have had projects approved at phase 1 can even submit for phase 2. Just make sure we're clear on that.
Yes, I understand that.
Okay. Good questions.
Dennis, so help me on this, but say I did a phase 1 and then in phase 2, I wanted to involve one of the research centers, I could involve a research center in the phase 2 of the SBIR side, right? I
Oh,
wouldn't,
yeah, you can
okay.
involve.
Yeah, all right, yeah, I just want to make sure that, because sometimes it's not quite, the technology is not quite to a point where to actually involve somebody else quite yet, and phase 2 it would make more sense to do
Sure.
that. Okay, I just want to make sure I was clear. Thanks.
No, that's fine. And I would just stress the point again that in the CRADA process, we don't know. Just remember, this is research. We don't know the direction it's going to go. And so consequently, it could be that we think we're going in one direction, and then the research is taking us into a different direction. And in those circumstances, what we would need to do is generate an amendment to the CRADA so we could make sure that the agreement supports the direction, the new direction of the research. And that's very simple to do.
Right, excellent. Dennis, I think we can let you go. It's 1:30 there, right? Hope you didn't miss your lunch.
It's never a problem. It's been a pleasure dealing with you as always, and thank you very much for the invitation. And please, for everyone on the line, just feel it's not an imposition. It's not a problem. I mean, if you've got a question, send me an email and I'll respond to it. I'll help you out, but I can't help you out if I don't know there's an issue. Okay.
That's terrific. And I will be getting in touch with you to make sure I get a copy of the slides so that I can forward those. And then we will take you up on your offer to help shepherd some of these should the need arise. And we really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
That's okay. You have a wonderful day. Thank you. Good luck,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye now.
Bye-bye. Okay, so we do have a few slides to cover today. Just to kind of have a little bit of brain time on where we are in the process. Can you see those? Oops, there it goes, jumping between monitors again. Okay, is that just the slides you see now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So, and Dan, are you a co-host yet? I can make you a co-host if you want to run the slides too.
No, you can run the slides.
Oh, okay. All right. So, where are we? Today that we're teeing you up to really start, we're hoping that you have some of these other things done. Let me jump to the bottom of the slide first. The little green stuff is your registrations definitely should be done. Hopefully your topic selection has been firmed up. And if you haven't already sent your project summary to your program manager for feedback, you should be doing that very soon. And also last week, we kind of covered the importance of, and this is all relating to what we're talking about today too, is these connections with partner organizations to obtain those commitments for the scope of work, for the specific tasks that are going to be done, whether that's subcontracted out or as, you know, it's funny when Dennis came in today and I'm thinking ARS, yeah, those are labs, we send them work. But I thought, isn't that interesting? We're moving money. If we win from one government group, then we're going to be paying another government group to do the work. But it sounds like there are a lot of great advantages to working with them if you are ready for those rigorous standards and protocols that he was talking about, but also a lot of support, which I hadn't realized quite how much support there was in the CRADA too. So then also several, I think 4 of you have sent your request for market research, and we're starting to parse some of that information here at ASBTDC to try to get you back what is going to be most useful for your phase 1 proposal. And then today, it's all about work plan and budget in 15 minutes or less. Dan, go.
Oh, me go. So in the sample slides, there's this work plan template, and this is actually designed by Sharon Ballard at Enable Ventures. So she's an Arkansas-based person that's been around in this space for 30 or 40 years. So basically the idea of this using a work plan worksheet is, you know, you have your objective 1, what are the tasks that you need to do to that? What resources do you need, you know, sort of the who, what, where, when, how type thing. And, you know, are any of these tasks dependent upon completion of other tasks? Those kind of things. So, you know, when we look, oh, we should have had my fancy leather little chart, but really what this is if you think about a process, so you have inputs, we have process, and then we have sort of the output. And what this is what are the inputs to your research? Within the process, what kind of information are you know, what kind of process are you using? What kind of facilities do you need? Those type of things, sort of that black box process. And then what is the outcome that you're expecting? So that's what this worksheet is trying to work you through. And I think there's probably a link on the work plan worksheet. That top is probably a link to the actual template. So
Yes, yes.
That's it. And one-on-ones we can go through this stuff with you.
Yellow. Yeah, and the yellow was our warning. I think you told me, Dan, that we want to make sure that if you think it's going to be more than 3 objectives, we really need to probably talk.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We just put this back in from last week just to remind you of where we kind of are in terms of the actual project narrative, that 17-page document, no more than 17 pages. And we're continuing to sort of scaffold this. So, you know, if you started out with smaller sentences and paragraphs, we're expanding those now because you're going to be deeply in the writing process here pretty soon, if you aren't already.
Yeah. And the work plan should be the biggest part of your proposal. It should be the meat of your proposal is this work plan, and a lot of details as far as how you're going to do experiment. Think about it as a recipe. You know, it's like step by step, how would I do this? And that's what reviewers like to see. That's what gives you credibility, that you know what you're doing, as opposed to just, you know, a sentence on, oh, I'm going to do this. And it's like, well, so what does that mean? What ISO standards are you following? What kind of other standards? What electrical, what UL standards do you need to deal with? You know, whatever those standards are, or whatever, you know, you need to know those things.
You ready for the next one? Okay, so Dan and I have been kind of going back and forth about, looks like Dan's frozen, about what you actually write when you get to the prompts and you're trying to answer the prompts, but you're also telling a story. So we've talked a lot about, like, is there a one right way to write this? And Dan, your answer is?
No, there's not. I mean, there's what tells the story the best for you and what's most comfortable for you. For some reason,
But the chunks, the components are these things, regardless of what order they're in.
yeah, everybody has a sort of a preference of how this goes together. I like the idea of the structure of talking about the team at the beginning of this section to begin with, giving people an idea, introduction to them, because you're going to talk to them later when you're talking about the objectives and the tasks. You're going to talk about who's actually doing that work, why they're qualified. So we get to do their qualifications up here. So the team for the company, but then also consultants, if you're using them, or, sub-awardees. And then also, if you're talking about the stakeholder participants, you might have a customer that you're working with, or a potential customer that's doing some review of the product that you're making, or discussion of how it's going to work for them, that type of thing. So I like starting with that, and then going into the where you're doing the locations where it's being performed, and then sort of getting into the Gantt chart, which will just show your objectives and your task, high level test, but in a chart. And then down below that, you're going to do the narrative on the objectives and the tasks. So the Gantt chart ties exactly with your objectives and your task in the narrative part. The Gantt chart should also tie with the objectives that you talked about in our summary statement and in our that first page of the narrative that I talked about last week, where we talk about the objectives. So it's all this repeating again and again. We want these reviewers to know this stuff off. We want, in a perfect world, they'll report. Yeah, just basically report back, or parrot back what we said. That's when you've done a good job, is if all of a sudden you read reviewers' comments and they're parroting back, the 1, 2, 3 things that you've said in the past. So that's how we can tell when we've done well. So project timeline example, objective 1, and truly these, the A, B, C, D under these is what should be described in length. I mean, each one of, in something like this, each one of those tasks, test A, it should be probably a third of a page description of what's going on. Now, if you're doing things where you're repeating, the steps, objective 1, it has these tests, and then objective 2, it has tests also, which are sort of the same tests that you did in objective 1. It's okay to say, as described in, task C of objective 1, we're going to repeat these kind of tests. It's okay. You don't need to cut and paste that, and nobody wants to read it twice, so don't do that. But if something's identical from task to task and different objectives, just go ahead and say that, as described.
And this particular image does not have a legend, but make sure you include a legend so we know what these mean. I don't know what those little triangles are.
And there is, like, if you look at the budget template, there's a tab in there that has a timeline that I like to use that's pretty easy to use. And once again, when we work with you guys one-on-one, we can work through that stuff. And if you have a favorite thing, use a favorite thing. Budget. All right. Direct labor. Let's see. So for us, most of the time, the direct labor is going to be a big deal. And that's how you're paying yourself, how you're paying anybody that's helping you. We need to reuse a fringe rate, since this is USDA and they only have this indirect rate that's 10%. We'll actually use a fringe rate. So fringe benefits include things like payroll taxes, vacation time, health insurance, 401ks, all these things that your small company probably doesn't have, but hopefully will in the future. But but we need to use a fringe rate, and it's pretty easy for a small startup company to justify a 15 to 20% rate once you look at those expenses. So we need to do that because we need to collect that money. So for SBIRs in your budget, no more than 1/3 of the budget can be outsourced to, this is consultant, subawardees, subcontractors, outside, any of those outside resources. Anybody that you're going to give a 1099 instead of a W-2 to, they're a consultant, regardless. So what you'll need to do is put people on payroll. Now, STTR, there is a difference. The Institute needs to perform more than 30%, and up to 60% can be outsourced. So, but it's the same thing. The other nice thing about the STTR is the PI can be from the research institution. So that's the other thing. Other direct costs, fee for service. So one way of getting around, like if you're working with a university that's doing a lot of testing, a lot of times they will actually have a price list out there. And if it's a fee for service, it doesn't count against your 1/3 budget. So if they have a price list out there and says it's $250 for each one of these tests, then we won't include that number in your consultants or subaward. We'll just put them under fee for service. The only reason that you use TABA, the $6,500 TABA, is if you are using a non-USDA vendor. And if you're going to do that, you need to get a letter from them and sort of justify why you want to use that vendor. So for a phase 1, I would probably, I'm not sure if I would jump through those hoops unless I had something specific I wanted to do. And then the other direct costs are like facilities and rents for R&D work. So if you actually have to go get space specifically for this project and rent it, then you can put it in there, right? And the indirect rate is this 10% municipal rate that USDA uses, which is a pain. All right.
Okay, take a breath. Does anybody have any questions? And I think Christina, did you come off mute because you had a question? No, yes, no, this was going by pretty fast.
Yeah. The nice thing is, we're sort of touching everybody, talking to everybody. So
yeah, we're happy to meet one-on-one to discuss the budget in detail. I know Dan did say, and one of the things I've learned just this week working with people on their budgets is when he was talking about the benefits of putting someone on the payroll versus, being stuck with paying them out of the, if you pay them for just as a subcontractor, you can only use so much money for subcontracting. So it gives you more, it expands your ability. In other words, if you can put them on the payroll, it sort of puts that money there instead of in the subcontract. And there's reasons to do that.
Yeah. And it's pretty simple nowadays using payroll services to put somebody on as a part-time employee. So a lot of cases, so I do software stuff a lot of times, and many times that 1/3 of the budget doesn't really go very far for this, the cost of what's going to be to program the software. And in some cases, I'm able to put a resource that works really closely with them, a software developer, on my payroll that is working sort of hand in hand with the subcontractor, but the budgets are in the right place. So that's one example of that, and it can happen in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's a good example. Anybody have any other question? And the budget worksheet
no crowd.
is
And it was now our phone call.
is helpful for just sort of playing with the numbers, running the numbers, and having real-time discussions about them. So if you haven't seen the budget template yet, I would highly recommend getting in there and looking at it, playing with the numbers, and or setting a meeting soon as you develop your work plan with your partners so that you can understand how much you have to, in the budget to ask them to do, how to basically scope the work. Okay, so what does de minimis mean, by the way?
I have no clue.
I don't know what Catherine, do you know what is the diminute, it's somewhere in the notes.
It's like basic.
It means minimum.
Yeah, I don't know why it's the Latin. But there it is. Okay, so. All right.
Dan, what would be the typical indirect rate? What should be an indirect rate? Should they go to the default of 10%
Oh,
or?
absolutely. Because if you don't go to the default of 10%, then you have to negotiate a rate and they won't give you any money. And that can take months and months and months. And they won't let you start taking any of the overhead or any of the indirect money until you get that negotiated rate in place. So do not put anything besides the 10%, and it's 10% of total cost. So it's not that bad. So if it's the 10% of total cost plus you're getting fringe on top of it, it's for most small companies, it should be okay. It should be covering most things. But
Dan,
yeah.
Dan, can I ask one more question? Because on STTR, a lot of times you're working with these institutions that have very high rates. Does that apply to subawards as well? Or is that more accounted for in fringe?
On subawards, so a subaward is sort of the same thing with a research institute, is usually the same thing. So if they have the research institute has a 50% indirect rate, whether you call it a subaward or a subcontract, they're probably going to try to charge it the 50% rate. It's just different universities sort of do different things. A subcontract, let's say you're working with a software vendor from outside the company, but not research institute, they're going to give you a quote, and their rates have a profit and indirect overhead rate built in. So they're collecting the same thing. So they're getting their profit and their overhead as part of their, they give you a bid for $40,000. It's including everything, right? So it's sort of buried for everybody, I would say. Anybody that's a consultant, subcontractor, subawardee, it's buried in there.
Great questions. Okay, so I think we just have a few more. We're approaching our quitting time. I think we just had the slide in here to show you examples of if you are working with a research institution, a lot of times they publish their fixed rate, their fixed costs, like Dan was just talking about, and those are kept up to date. So that's a good thing to look for if you're pricing this out now. And there's another thing you have to do in the preparation of your submission for the grant, the budget justification. That's kind of the narrative to go with the budget. Not too hard, but
yeah, and this is a place, a lot of times there's not a good place in USDA to really talk about people. This is a place besides your work plan that you've done in the narrative, is to talk about the people, what they're doing, what they're doing in the project. You could even talk about their qualifications. Usually these things are only a couple pages long, but sometimes it's nice to remind people about the senior and key personnel. Equipment and supplies, you should, we've talked about equipment before, that we really don't want to do anything over $5,000, and it causes all kinds of problems if you propose a bunch of equipment. So I would stay away from it, or talk to me and Karen, see if there's another way around it. I've rented expensive equipment before. I've sent samples out for testing that I would like to have the piece of equipment in-house, but you can't really justify, an expensive piece of equipment when you can get the testing done for a few $1,000s. So we can talk about how to do that, but equipment, material, supplies, ultimately you're going to have some kind of a list. And if you put that in the budget justification, if you say, okay, this is, rough order of magnitude, the supplies I'm going to need, the chemicals I'm going to need to do this, include that in some kind of a spreadsheet. You're going to do it ultimately, again, anyways, when they want to give you an award, they're going to ask you for more details, but do what you can. And let's see, and now we're to this. What do you say about that?
There was just a quick, I think we put this on here because we just wanted to remind you that, and this has been coming up in several projects. When does it make sense to have an association involved, a trade organization or a professional organization, or some of these local kind of local or regional partners?
Yeah, and there's a couple reasons you want to do this. Is a lot of times this is somebody that could be an aggregator or a customer that so a lot of trade associations could be their clients or their members could be customers for you ultimately. So so many times getting those kinds of letters or figuring out how to get their research arms involved in your project, whether even if it's just lightly, just sort of reviewing the results of your phase one, something like that. That's usually very helpful.
Or a focus group type stuff.
Yeah, focus groups are nice. So if you're doing software, if you want to present, like if Ken wanted to present some information to some beekeepers association to really get people lined up for phase two, that would be one way of doing it. So there's a lot of what I try to do in phase one is get lined up with these kind of associations. So my software client or friend that I've been working with for 20 years, we do a lot of work with firefighters, first responders, and we have the really close relationship with the International Association of Firefighters, which represents, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of firefighters. And they do training and they do a lot of stuff in our space. And we use them, not so much in phase one. Phase one, we give them a pretty small stipend to help us a little bit with some stuff. But usually in phase two, they will put groups of instructor firefighters together to talk about the training that we provided. And what happens out of that for us is they become customers. Because it's a really messed up marketplace. It's very fragmented and it's a big mess. But we use the International Association of Firefighters as our aggregator for those customers. So that's one example of how you can do that.
Great. And then we've been hammering on this idea that if you haven't started thinking about your market research questions, you could start to submit them, and we can, of course, always refine them. Just take a stab at it. But generally speaking, you're looking for your end user growth or demand, just to show the size of the market, any trends, the things that we would be able to find would be a lot of the same things that you could find, unless you need a deeper dive into the actual statistics, like growth statistics, market size, those kind of things. But like if it's journals, we can dig a little deeper into some of the scientific journals, but we also need probably some of your references to help get us started so that we understand exactly where your research or your terminology fits in a broader subject area. And I'm saying me and my market research group at ASBTDC, because we don't know your science like your science. So you have to work with us on terminology, keywords, and also honing in on exactly what you're trying to find. And also, you can't ask us for research if you really don't know who your ultimate target audience is, or which of the segments make sense for your application. So, sometimes there are multiple segments or sectors within an industry, and it could be very broad. So there are multiple sectors. We can't look at all of them if yours is uniquely suited to one or two of them. You need to hone down the one or two and let us know what you're looking at and what really makes sense for your business model. And that sort of begs the question, is your business model solid? Do you know how these people would buy? Do you know where they are? Do you know what else they're using, or who your competitors are in that space if it's already being done by another supplier in a different way? So market research is kind of it's more of an art than a science sometimes, getting to the right questions. So I'm just saying be thinking and sending us those. And then also your other action items for this week, still looking for feedback from your MPL in your topic area. You should also be still working on your technical objectives, starting on the work plan and the budget like we just talked about. And research your dream customers and advisors. Who are they? And where can you meet? And then when we convene again next week, we'll be looking at these next sections that and also we added the Ag and Food Roundtable listserv, which is something you can subscribe to that is monitored and supplied by University of Arkansas as just a way to stay up on news, or if you have something you want to share, if there's something that you're looking for in the Arkansas network related to food science, agriculture. This is a pretty robust listserv. But you only get out of it what you put into it. So, you know, you really, if you want to get active, you need to be actively engaged and looking for connections through the listserv. But call me if you have any questions about that. I think that is it for our slides. And we're a little over time. I apologize for running late. Running a little long. Does anybody have any final questions or concerns? Just encourage you to meet one-on-one weekly if you can from now on, maybe over the next 5 weeks. Meet weekly with your consultants, me and Dan, or me and Dan and Catherine, or anybody else that you might be working with, just to stay on track, because we left more room at the front end to give you time to kind of get organized, but now it's pretty much marching orders, hitting those deadlines. You know, and I know that's the teacher in me, sorry. Just want to keep everybody doing their homework so that you don't end up staying up all night at the end, stressing out. So with that, if nobody has any questions.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you again. And we'll see you next week or in our meetings. Bye-bye. So Christina, are you okay? You said you were overwhelmed. Are you you're working on NIH and USDA?
And NSF, yeah.
And NSF, yeah.
Well, we I think we jumped through all the hoops necessary for the live animal use. That was I don't know if Brittany had updated you on that, or I mean, I know last week the NSF just doesn't do any work with farm animals. And we had to, it was like a big circle with the NSF and the NIH to figure out what we needed to do. And then we had to do the vertebrate animals section for the NIH for the PHS.
Okay.
And that was hours of my life. We got that submitted. They came back with more questions, and then they said, well, they came back with more requests for information and said, well, why don't you work under A State's IACUC? And A State's already said no. And then there was one sentence that said, you won't need to do any of this if these things that are happening to them in the research study would be happening to them anyway. And because these are economically valuable animals that would undergo embryo transfer anyway.
Oh, interesting.
Have to do all that.
Wow. Wow.
So I could have just drank it.
But did you get that corroborated and in writing?
We just had to make that one statement. That's it.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. And the buck stopped there. Okay, good.
I will say that the producers probably would not have done it to the scale because of the cost involved without the study.
Yeah.
But it still would have happened, if that makes sense.
Right. I love that.
So yeah, that's
anytime the government can actually make your job easier in the end. Whoops, we're still recording, aren't we?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I need to stop my recording.